the way from Tampa Bay, the radio host of WDAE, Zach Blobner. Zach, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm phenomenal. I appreciate you bringing me aboard for a few minutes, man. Excited to chat.
So am I, because, I lived down there for 36 years, used to listen to you a lot down there, as well as all the other guys on WDAE, so it's really a pleasure. Let me ask you right away, Zach, what kind of effect the last couple of months, the COVID-19, has it had on you personally and as a radio host, on this epidemic that's going on, as far as you being a radio host and just on WDAE as general?
Yeah, for me, I would argue that I've probably been affected a lot less than other people in the industry when it comes to work. I mean, I still am going in to do my job. I'm also working on some other shows outside of Tampa Bay, but I do those remotely anyways. So as far as daily operations go, I haven't changed my routine a whole lot. Now, we've used this time to implement some new ideas and things that we had wanted to try but hadn't had the chance to when things were quote-unquote normal prior to the pandemic kind of taking place. So that aspect of it has been fun, but, that was unnecessary. That's just something we're doing in the interim. With that being said, the way that we go about our shows and the building in general is very different, especially when you consider the content side of the things for at least us on the sports radio, which is sports, and there aren't sports happening right now. I mean, we're slowly rolling back into some of them, like NASCAR, like golf, UFC, but the big four, the hockey, baseball, basketball, and football worlds have yet to kind of get back on track, at least in America, when it comes to those types of things. My two hosts that I specifically work close with in the morning, Ronnie and Tom, they're working remotely, so there's been another layer of communication added into the mix to make sure we're on the same page and that the show runs normal in the morning. And then as far as my bosses and virtual meetings and all that, those things at first seemed a little odd. I mean, I'm comfortable with it. I grew up around a lot of digital things. I'm a very digitally thinking type of person. I enjoy that aspect of technology when it comes to, how you can interact with people digitally. So for me, that part kind of came naturally, but there was a lot of adjustments and people that I was speaking with that had to get comfortable doing virtual meetings and talking on teleconferences with video chat added. And so far, it's been smooth for the most part. I mean, I give a lot of guys that I work with closely, and a lot of people at iHeart in Tampa Bay, a lot of credit. And I've been saying that for a few weeks now, because if I had to put money on all these people figuring out technology as quickly as they have and be able to use it as coherently as they do, I would not have done that. But they've all done a really good job, and I'm really impressed with people who typically don't work in that realm figuring it out. And again, our day-to-day operations pretty much running smoothly despite there not being sports and us not all being in the building.
Now, it was about a week ago, roughly, that Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, pretty much did a little speech there talking about professional sports and how he's welcoming them to come to Tampa Bay. What was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was very interesting to hear him say that. Not just Tampa Bay, but the state of Florida. I actually went to the University of Florida, which is a place you specifically brought up, saying, hey, one of the ideas we have is if there's a pro team that can't play in their own city and needs a stadium, that they could potentially play Sundays in the swamp while the Gators play on Saturday. And there's logistics involved there, but I know that it works down in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium with the Dolphins and the Hurricanes. You certainly look at some of the other areas that you could potentially have different teams coming down in Orlando. There's room there in Tallahassee at Doak where FSU plays. There's room there on Sundays, Thursday night games, Monday night games, those types of things when you think about NFL teams. And that's just football related. We didn't even jump into some of the other things. I know the MLB and NHL considering select cities to have a shortened season or just a playoff type season in the NHL's case, and Florida, all the area down here is certainly on the map. So I think, as far as staying away from the actual political side of it and, not trying to be a scientist myself and say if it's plausible, hypothetically speaking, though, from a sports angle, I think it's great. I think if you could, in theory, for us down here, you can never have too many sports and it's a little greedy, but again, in theory, if you could go to a Gator LSU game on a Saturday, and then you could go to, let's say, the Giants and the Bears on Sunday, in the same stadium, I think it's, a unique experience unlike we'll ever see again. So I think it's awesome. I think it's a great, cool thing that could potentially come out of this.
Now, over the past week, unfortunately, some of the biggest sports news has come out of Tampa Bay area, but it's not because of what happened on the field. It's because what has been said off the field with the comments by Blake Snell. And, when I listened to that, and I know by now you've listened to it as well, I really thought it wasn't so much. Part of the message I understood with the cut, an additional cut, but I really think it was the presentation of the whole message that really started stirring people up, not just in the Tampa Bay area, but in the entire nation.
Yeah, I like that Blake Snell shoots from the hip. I've had many conversations with him, some on the record, some off, and he's pretty much the same guy either way, and I appreciate that in a person, especially an athlete and in this industry. I've been around so many different ones in different sports, different ages, different backgrounds that you do learn to appreciate guys like Blake Snell that'll just be honest in themselves regardless of the situation. Now, this is such a major conversation and one that really has touched us all in some way, shape, or form. And for the most part, I would argue pretty much everybody has had it affect them negatively. I can't imagine how many people out there would say that the pandemic's been a good thing for them, whether you're talking financially, medically, or just in general, when you consider all the other things we've lost just from an entertainment value, if you haven't been affected by the other two big pieces. So with that being said, Blake, in general, probably should have been more careful with his comments in that regard. I'm sure once he started saying the things he said, he didn't anticipate them blowing up and becoming as viral as they did in a talking piece. But there's no real sports going on right now, so anything like that's going to be amplified even more than it already would have been. And, he needs to have the wherewithal to notice that that's going to come along with those types of comments. And now, generally speaking, when I reacted to them, I understand where he's coming from. And this is the way that I look at it, is like anybody who has to take any type of pay cut agrees to it and then is told you have to take another pay cut, regardless of the pandemic side, just from a financial side. Like, what employee is going to be happy about that? We're not hooraying at all and really excited that, whether it's unpaid vacation or whether, you have to take a salary cut or whatever it may be. Like, no employee is going to be happy to make less money. Now, with that being said, there are a lot of employees, even outside of baseball and other businesses, that have either been furloughed or let go altogether from their company. And so, that's the worst side of it. Like, taking a pay cut sucks, but losing your job altogether is a much, much worse situation to be in. And that's why a lot of people do take pay cuts, so that they don't lose their job. Now, I know that there's a lot of comparisons out there like, for people that backed Blake Snell that said that if they understood where he was coming from and they actually supported it because Blake had, and the players, not just Blake, all the MLB players had agreed to certain things. And then, you have these billionaire owners that are basically saying, we can't afford this. And people are siding with the millionaire over the billionaire because the billionaire clearly has more money. But from a business standpoint, again, these billionaires are hemorrhaging money. And if the season doesn't happen, you're talking about a loss of almost $9 billion for missing one season of baseball. That's a lot of money for, again, a business owner. They're not going to go hungry and be on the street and not be able to pay their bills, but that's a big, big business hit. And so, like any big business that's taking a big business hit, their employees are going to feel it as well. And they're not the only big industry. Disney, even iHeartMedia, we're all taking hits right now. And, I feel comfortable saying, at least off the top of my head, that a lot of these places, a lot of these business owners are doing their best to help in ways that they can. Back into the sports world, how many of these owners, including the owner of the Rays, has went out and paid employees during the first month or the first month and a half or two or whatever it was when they weren't even working? There's a lot of CEOs and owners that were paying employees that weren't working. And it was nice, and obviously it wasn't the employees' fault that they weren't working. There's a pandemic. But no business owner is required to pay employees that aren't working. And again, I commend them for it. But I'm also not going to condemn them now that they're trying to figure out ways to get back on the field. And part of those ways might include players taking less again.
But like you said, and you mentioned it, the epidemic's going on and everybody in the world, is facing similar situations, just maybe on a smaller scale. But isn't this the time where maybe baseball should be working together and exemplifying how us as a nation should work together to get back on the field?
Yeah, I mean, look, in a perfect world, we want them to work together. I think any sports fan in their core is like, yeah, I just hope that they know it's an important deal for us in the country for our mental health, for, entertainment helps mental health. It helps people get their mind off of the real BS that's going on in their own life. Maybe there are people that are struggling even more financially than Blake is, and I'm sure there's a lot of them. I know I'm certainly one comparatively to the situation he's in as a millionaire. But, on the same hand, again, it's all relative. Everything we do is relative. And if you're Blake Snell or you're any employee, any baseball player, you want to get baseball back. You love baseball, and you want to be able to help those and others when you can. But with it being relative, they're an employee. They're not happy with what their boss is asking them to do, and there's some friction there. And in a perfect world, yeah, they would just put it all aside and say, we're going to play for the love of the game. But that's not reality. That's not how it works.
Right. Now, before we let you go, I want to talk a little bit of football with you because obviously one of the biggest teams in the NFL during the offseason has been the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And
yes, sir.
And, you being a big Buccaneer fan, I had season tickets last year to the Bucs when I lived down there. Let me ask you, Tom Brady, arguably the greatest quarterback ever to play the game. He's played the game for 20 years now. Do you think, and I know he's won 6 Super Bowls, been in the playoffs many times, but is this possibly the most pressure that Tom Brady has had on him to win than ever before?
I think you could probably answer that either way. I mean, I think it's to each person that has, to each their own, and we all are going to have different opinions on it. I think you could obviously argue that, well, there's no Belichick, so now everybody's going to be watching to either say, well, was it Belichick or was it Brady? And that's the main storyline. So certainly in that regard, being a 2-year deal, Bruce Arians not, wanting to coach for the next 10 years, there's a lot of things that do add to that pressure, for sure. I mean, but this is a guy who's lived in the pressure, right? Like, if you're constantly swimming in the deep end and you go from a 15-foot pool to a 16-foot pool and you're swimming in that one, is it that much of a difference? Like, technically, it is more pressure, but by how much more? And if you live in that world and you're used to it, you're comfortable with it, I don't know if Brady's going to feel any more pressure than normal. I think that man always plays with a chip on his shoulder. You don't get to be the GOAT. You don't get to reach the levels of success he has if you're not constantly finding an edge. I mean, I know a lot of us have watched The Last Dance documentary series with Michael Jordan. He's always competitive. He's always looking for reasons to, get that fuel, that fire going in every game. And I think Brady's a very similar guy in that fashion. So whether it's the Deflategate, whether it's whatever he's got to do to put up bulletin board material to get himself going, he's going to do. And he's lived in that world of pressure for so long. It's natural for him to be in it yet again. So I think from the outside looking in, we can certainly point out it might be the most pressure-filled season he's ever had. But I think internally he's like, it's just another year where I always put that amount of pressure on myself. It's no different of a jungle, and I'm no different of a beast than I'm used to.
Now, obviously this team has what I would say is definitely the best offense in the National Football League. Some people may question them at running back a little bit, but the big question this year comes on the defensive side of the football. Now, yes, they did a great job against the rush last year defensively. I think they only allowed 68 yards rush in a game. Are you comfortable with their defense against the pass next year?
Well, a lot of it's based on projections. I mean, like you mentioned, we have hard facts that the run defense will be good again. And you never know your year until you see it. I mean, there's offenses that are great and then suck in the following season. I think the Rams is a good one to point to, both offensively and defensively from the year that they were in the Super Bowl a couple seasons ago. Excuse me. And as we look at what the Bucs can be defensively, it's got to be a thing where you hope that all these players continue on the trajectory, because a lot of that secondary being so young, Shaq Barrett finally getting a season where he is the sack leader because he gets a chance to perform. He is the main guy, the main pass rusher. Can he repeat? Can the younger guys go from year 1 to year 2, or in some of their cases, year 2 to year 3, and really, really pop the way that we hope they will, again, based on projection, based on trajectory. There's a lot of, hypotheticals and projections in there, and it's both on the field, it's hard to buy into. But on paper and following, what would make sense, like if somebody, just like whenever you're working out, if you're running and you're running a mile a day, well, at some point you should be able to run a mile and a half and then 2 miles. And projections are there for a reason, because typically that's the way things go. And sometimes people do better than the projections. Sometimes they do certainly a lot worse. With the players in the Bucs secondary and a lot of these young guys, they should do better this season, which means the defense should be better. I wouldn't necessarily put any money on it, though, myself. So do I feel comfortable with it? Sure, mainly because I have to. I mean, I don't necessarily, again, think I'd bet any money on it, though, because there's just too much unknown.
Now, Zach, you got to admit, from a radio host perspective, I mean, once sports get started back up, and I'm talking about the big three in Tampa with hockey, football, and baseball, it's got to be an exciting time to be a radio sports host in Tampa Bay right now.
Yeah, I think that in general, 100%. I'm with you. And it's like, I'm so excited to see the Rays coming off a little playoff run, the Lightning, where they should be a cup contender yet again, for the foreseeable future, and then the Bucs, as we just mentioned, with Tom Brady on board, Rob Gronkowski. However, I have no idea what kind of access we're going to have. I mean, we talk about there being no fans in the stadium. I would imagine media, if they're even allowed in, will be extremely, extremely less than usual. There's going to be a ton of restrictions, and it's just going to be very different. I think I'll be able to enjoy it still a lot, especially from the outside looking in, assuming I'm not at every game or at, any of the games, depending on what the restrictions are. So I'm going to enjoy it, but it's going to be bittersweet, I think, also in a lot of ways, because great example, it's not going to be like Ray Spring Training. We get to do our Ray Spring Training trip. There's a lot we do around Ray Spring Training to get pumped up, and I get access and I get to talk to a lot of these guys in a way that I don't during the season, and I definitely won't during the season now if it happens. Same thing with the Lightning in the playoffs, and same thing with the Bucs in training camp. Training camp's not to be the same. So usually those pockets of these teams where I get the most access and I can kind of get, my own scoop and my own conversations going with these athletes, it's not going to exist. And if it does, it's going to be in such a smaller capacity than I've ever been used to it. But it's going to be bittersweet in some ways. But nonetheless, the games will still most likely, as far as we know, be televised for all these sports, assuming they come back. And from that element of it, these teams are supposed to be successful, and successful means that it should be fun to watch.
We're talking to Zach Blobner from WDAE Radio in Tampa. Zach, before I let you go, I have to ask you this question. I'm now living in Bentonville, Arkansas, and Arkansas obviously is a huge, huge college football town with the Hogs playing here. I lived in Tampa, like I told you, for 36 years. I know you went to the University of Florida. I'm a big Gator fan. You are obviously a big Gator fan. Why don't you tell our listeners in Arkansas, because Felipe Franks transferred over from the Gators now. He is projected to be the starting quarterback for the Razorbacks. Why don't you tell our listeners who follow the Razorbacks what they're getting in Felipe Franks?
Well, they're going to get a guy who definitely has some pizzazz, some spice, some flair, a big arm. When he came out, he was one of the top athletic quarterbacks in that recruiting class. And he certainly has a very, very good skill set. As any fiery player, though, especially the younger ones, it can be both good and bad, right? You get too much of that passion, and it can blow up in your face a little bit. And I wish nothing but the best for Felipe, and I say that in the most politically correct way possible. However, I was very critical of him when he was at Florida because there were certain things that he did, such as shushing his own fan base who booed him for playing so awful that he warranted the boos in the first place. Those are the types of things that I struggle to let go of, watching him from the outside looking in. But with that being said, his teammates never had anything but good things to say about him. And even when he was hurt, Kyle Trask, now the quarterback at Florida, said that Franks was fantastic to him. Great leadership, great friendship, and was there for him, despite, that guy being the one that took his job and had his job, mainly because of injury at that point, but nonetheless. So there's a lot of great qualities. He's certainly a freak athlete in a lot of ways at the quarterback position. He can run. And I think the passion is something that you're going to love in some games, and there's going to be moments where you're like, bench this kid because he's driving me crazy. So hopefully it's more of the first one for Razorbacks fans, but again, I'm careful where I place my bets.
Zach, I want to change you. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Frankly Speaking Sports. You know, like I said, I followed you now for a while when I was down in Tampa. I just recently moved here. Follow all you guys on WDAE, and I just want to wish you the best of luck.
Hey, you too, man, and let's definitely link up again here soon, hopefully once there's actually games being played.
You got it. Be safe, my friend.
You too, brother.
That was the great Zach Blobner.